So this just goes under the category of Donald Trump taking hits from everywhere.
Well, it goes under the category of people that Republican voters will never take advice from. Harry Reid and Elizabeth Warren. So if Harry Reid and Elizabeth Warren are saying, hey, GOP voters, don't vote for Donald Trump, we don't like him, that's pretty much an advertisement for Donald Trump. The reality is that Harry Reid is terrified of the fact that tens of millions of Republican voters are going to be energetically going to the polls for Donald Trump, and tens of millions of Democrat voters are going to be defecting from his party to support Donald Trump. And that's really where this is coming from.
Well, Stephen, to your point, we saw in Massachusetts 20,000 Democrats actually change parties so that they could vote for Donald Trump. So getting back to this idea of the delegates, the race for the delegates, Donald Trump clearly in the lead, but Senator Cruz says Trump will not get all the delegates for the nomination. Here's the senator.
If Donald continues getting delegates at the same rate he has so far, he won't get to 1237. He needs to get 54% of the remaining delegates to get there. He hasn't been doing that. He's been getting below 50%.
So any truth to those comments? I mean, in fairness, as we just showed our viewers, Trump is by far the closest candidate right now to that magic 1,237.
Well, we do know that Ted Cruz was a mock debate champion in law school, but I was not aware that he was a mathematician, so I really don't know about his delegate math. What I do know is that we've had contests now in around 30 states, and Donald Trump has won overwhelmingly in those states, and Ted Cruz has performed very, very poorly and has no path to the nomination whatsoever. What's interesting also is that Ted Cruz is always talking about how he wants this to be a serious race on the issues, and yet he never seems to talk about the issues. All he ever says is, I could beat Donald Trump, look at the delegate math. He never talks about the issues anymore. Ted Cruz is officially running a completely issues-free campaign, combined with occasionally lending aid and comfort to far-left protesters.
Although, Stephen, that sometimes are the hits that Donald Trump takes, meaning a lot of people say we like his spirit, we like the tone, but he hasn't offered a lot of details. And Cruz is getting support from some pretty unlikely sources. I mean, Lindsey Graham, who weeks ago kind of made a joke saying if somebody killed Ted Cruz in Congress, nobody would really move on that, and now he is endorsing him. Does that concern you at all, that Cruz is pulling in party leaders?
It doesn't concern me at all that Lindsey Graham, the architect of open borders, the architect of our failed interventionist foreign policy, is saying that he thinks Ted Cruz should be president. No, that doesn't concern me at all. It should concern Ted Cruz. I'd be interested to know what Ted Cruz thinks about the endorsement, but it doesn't concern me at all.
All right, now ahead of the convention in Cleveland, it was announced recently that Donald Trump's campaign manager will also be a delegate. Is that unusual?
I don't really pretend to know the history of delegates in the history of the United States, but remember, the voters are the ones who cast the votes, and the delegates are pledged by the voters, so it's much ado about nothing. The voters are the ones who decide where the delegates go, and we're going to get to 1,237. But I really do want to underscore again, in all this talk about trying to stop Donald Trump, what's really going on here? You have a political class that is terrified that the gravy train is going to get shut down. It's been hard out there for Americans everywhere outside of Washington, D.C. But here in D.C., it's pretty good. Here in D.C., the political class is doing wonderful. And they're worried that if Donald Trump is president, suddenly we're going to start taking care of the guy who goes to work at a steel mill, not the guy who goes to work at a lobbying firm on K Street.
So, Stephen, but when people say, you know what, Donald Trump as a businessman was part of the system as recently as, let's say, 12 months ago, as his critics point out, he has given money on both sides of the aisle to both types of candidates. So how do you answer that one-on-one?
Donald Trump as a businessman was a wildly successful businessman, owns many of the best, most iconic properties in the world. Ted Cruz as a politician is a failed politician. So you have a successful businessman running against a failed politician. I don't really see that as a difficult contest. And again, if you have all of these establishment people lining up behind Ted Cruz like Lindsey Graham, it really tells you that the people who want things to stay exactly as they are lining up behind Ted Cruz.
Have you seen some of the pieces that compare Donald Trump to Andrew Jackson? I'm just curious.
I've seen some of those pieces. I will tell you this, is that, and I don't want to pretend that I'm a historian, but what you do see happening here is a forgotten and disenfranchised group of Americans getting engaged in the political process because they understand that we've been veering dangerously in the direction of an oligarchy. And this really may be a once-in-a-lifetime chance to give everyday people control over their futures again. So I do see that happening.
Well,
and I think that's why you have millions of people
yeah.
running into the political process for the first time.
Yeah, the turnout numbers so far for the primaries and the caucuses, to your point, have been stronger than they have been in years.